And they did that throughout, and this is somewhat, what I'm going to be talking about next is somewhat conjecture, because nobody really can verify fully unless it really is coming from the Lord. But from what I understand is that this solar system was populated by the fallen angels who had planetary trade, and they had a whole system where they were inhabiting different worlds. They had way stations. They talk about this in all the different teachings of the Sumerian peoples this is from a book talking about the prior times, even before the Sumerian cultures were established by these fallen angels post-flood. And they have a history of what these fallen angels talk about as far as their life and how they evolved and came up on their planet Nibiru, and it's called the Lost Book of Enki. And for anybody that wants to know more about it, you can read about their history. It's supposed to be, even they say they came to the Earth 400,000 years ago, or somewhere between 400,000 and 200,000 years ago, which, do we really know? No, we don't know. But we know that there's several kingship lists, the Sumerian kingship lists, that describe these long dynasties where, they had populated and created all these civilizations. Well, they were then, manipulating and creating and corrupting the genetics of different creatures and even the vegetables and the vegetarian world that was here. They were doing abominable things. They were even having sexual acts. It even talks about in that Lost Book of Enki where the Anunnaki, when they first did these genetic DNA experiments, then what happened is they went actually to bestiality. Enki actually impregnated with his own seed this ape woman and created whatever it was, their hybrid creation. It was some abominable creation. Who knows what it was? But it talks about all of that, and this was before the creation of humanity. So the Lord was watching the angels already corrupting and destroying worlds, and so we know from Peter 2, chapter 3, where it talks about the destruction of the first world age, because it was a great flood. Who knows what kind of flood? It could have been a universal. I don't know what kind of flood it was, but it was a massive something to do that destroyed the first world age and all the cities and the planets of the fallen angels. And it's my opinion that this took place with the introduction of Nibiru, because if we study the Enuma Elish, and I'm actually going to put a book out on this at some point when I get some time, but if you study the Enuma Elish and some of the Babylonian creation tales, the epic tales, there's also, in the Lost Book of Enki, there's a Sumerian description of the Enuma Elish, and it gives you a story of what happened to the planet Tiamat and how Nibiru became part of the solar system. And in that tale, it talks about the outer planets capturing Nibiru, and I believe the Lord did all of this specifically on purpose, because what had happened is that Nibiru was then brought in. It was spinning the opposite direction, and it was actually taken into trajectory to what was known as the planet Rahab, or a planet that was there where the asteroid belt was. And this planet was shattered by one of the moons in Nibiru, and it was split into two, one part turning into what is now our moon. It was called Kingu, and the other part, the Tiamat, the split part of Tiamat, then became what was known as the Earth. And it was the impact of that moon, the satellite impact in that planet Tiamat, that moved the Earth, or Tiamat, what it was originally called, to where the Earth is now, and also gave us the moon also as a satellite, which, if you look at all the other planets, there's no other satellites that are that large, whether it's a artificial or whatever it is. We know that it's special and unique to our particular world. And then life became at the precise distance and all the everything became perfect for then what the Lord did as far as creating modern humanity. And this is when the second world age happened, because the Lord created humanity, put them in paradise, and the fallen angels, they wanted to take revenge against Yahushua by causing Adam and Eve to fall. So,
Zen, at what point, because we're entering now the second age, at what point did, you talked about the angelics cohabiting the universes and traversing the planets and the Tiamat and Nibiru issue, but at what point did the rebellion occur, and why did God create the new Adam, and at what point did that occur?
The rebellion occurred at the very moment that the Lord brought Yahushua into being as the light. Because it was in that moment that Lucifer, because he thought himself to be the first created angel, the archangel, and he thought he was going to have dominion over the whole universe. He wanted to be in the seat of the sun. And so it was in that moment when the Lord unfolded the light and brought Yahushua into being as the Word, and it was through him as the Word that everything else was unfolded. The planet here and all that. It was Yahushua as the Word that was the manifestation of the Father that did all of that. And so it was Lucifer's rebellion against him that caused them to be banished out of the heavens, which if you read the book of the Secrets of Enoch, it says that they were cast out at that time on the second day. So from the second to the sixth day, they had free roam and all that time. So
are you saying that prior to Yahushua manifesting as light, I guess my simple mind says it was dark. Are you saying that the angels,
it was all darkness.
How did the angels traverse universes in total darkness?
No, they weren't traversing then. They weren't. None of all that had happened until they were banished. Once Yahushua brought the creation into visibility, and then creation could be seen, then all the angels marveled. Remember, it said that all the angels marveled at the creation of the morning star, or when everything came into being and they were able to see the vastness. Can you imagine just sitting in darkness and then all of a sudden the whole entire universe comes into visibility?
Okay, for clarity, at what day did the light occur?
It was the second day. It says that.
What were they doing during the first day, which could be thousands of years? We don't know. Because what were they actually doing in darkness? Just sitting there, or what were they doing?
Yeah, it says they were just sitting there in darkness, and they thought themselves to be pre-existing beings. It was like a pause. There was like a pause where the initial dynamics of creation were implementing all those super forces. Gravity was taking place. Worlds were dividing. Planets were being created. Galaxies were spinning off. They were, all this was being watched in darkness. And when the Lord split the light and the darkness, Yahushua came into being, they saw all the universes. They saw everything then. They didn't want to serve. 1/3 of the angels didn't want to serve. They wanted to go explore all the stuff that they had just seen come into visibility. All these worlds, the vastness of the universe. They wanted to go find their own worlds to rule. And that's what they did.
Yeah, I was going to say, is that not what they did with Atlantis and everything? And maybe
yes, that's exactly what they did.
So on the second day, light occurred. They wanted to start roaming around. Hey, look at all this.
Look at all this incredible stuff. Look at this planet. Look at this world.
And so they went and actually explored and set up camp, Mars and other locations.
Right.
So that was at the beginning of the second day. So continue from that point.
Okay, so and I covered a lot of this, because then from the second to the sixth day, the fallen angels, as the Elohim, and not necessarily, even though they rebelled, there were some that weren't even in rebellion to the Lord that also were exploring and doing the service of the Lord in establishing and creating whatever it is that the Lord was establishing and creating too. So you have both sets of angels as the fullness of the Elohim going out into the universes and manifesting and creating and helping to manipulate and bring, whatever it is that they do. From the second to the sixth day, they were doing that. The fallen angels were busy establishing all of their civilizations and stuff. But they were doing everything based on, abusing everything and using everything the same way that we do here on this planet.
At what point did the alignment with Lucifer occur, like the division of fallen angel versus...
Second day.
Okay. So
Second day, that's when Lucifer was cast out. He was cast out with 1/3 of his angels. It was on that day.
And where was he cast to at that point on the second day?
It says to the bottomless. They were just cast out of the upper heavens, and they were cast to the lower heavens, which the lower heavens are from the sixth heaven down. So, and there's many people that think that the heavens expand out into the universe. Like some say that the waters below are the waters above are those areas that are beyond the asteroid belt, because they say that the asteroid belt was actually where the waters were divided. And so the heavens, the lower heavens would be below, from the asteroid belt below then, is what I understand. But I don't have, I can't tell you for sure as far as that either. But it does make sense that they would be banished to this solar system, and then for Rahab to be destroyed, and then for them to be then banished here to this planet and to this earth, because this is where the end game was going to happen.
So this all occurred at the beginning of the second day, and so between the second and sixth, you have a division of the good angels and the fallen angels, still sent out as the Elohim plural, both groups, to create and continue to help Yeshua and Yahweh, the Creator, help. I wouldn't say help, but to carry out their desire to set up the universes.
Their wishes, their desires, yes. And then so we come to, again, to Peter chapter 3, where it talks about the destruction of the first world age. You also go to Jeremiah chapter 4, where it talks about, lo, see all the cities that were destroyed, lo, there was no man, all the birds in the heaven fled. It talks about that, the destruction of, this particular fallen angel cultures and civilizations, and there was a war in heaven. And I do believe that the good angels and the bad angels, that they were fighting, and there's actual, there's even stuff on the moon that it shows this. There's even on Phobos, strafing on Phobos. I mean, there is evidence of a war in heaven on many different levels. And how all that took place, we don't know exactly. But yeah, a major war in heaven did happen, did occur, still is happening, still is occurring. But the focus is going to be here, because it talks about, even in the revelation of St. John the Theologian, that at the end of days, when judgment would be nearing, they would be stripped of their ability to fly and their ability to get away. Because judgment is coming, and they're going to be judged. This is it. This is it for them.
At what point along the second to sixth day did the Jeremiah chapter 4 destruction occur in your view?
I think it was right, it could have been when Atlantis happened. It could have been that 13,000-year episode before. Who knows exactly when it was, but it was a total destruction of, their cultures and civilizations by water. Talks about how, all these, their civilizations are even under the water. We know there's a place called off the coast of Japan. They just recently found it. It's a city that's like miles and miles up underneath the ocean that couldn't possibly, according to history and to what we know as science, shouldn't exist. Because it's this megalithic structure and complex that was built in a fashion and a form that we can't even replicate today. But if you know about this history that I'm talking about, know about the fallen angels and about their prehistory before ours, then you'll understand, and it all makes sense. And so that Jeremiah 4 destruction is talking about that major destruction. And there were many, because, even Sodom and Gomorrah and those 5 cities, they were destroyed. Atlantis was destroyed. The Lord has been destroying them over and over and over throughout the very beginning, just to keep them in alignment and just to keep them in check and to slow them up in their agenda. Even with, the Tower of Babel, when they created that Stargate and that system to get into the heavens, the Lord came down and confounded all the tongues and split up all the tribes and separated all the people. He was temporarily, stopping the agenda, that New World Order, the global government that Satan is trying to manifest.
Okay.
So we get to the second world age. You want to go there?
Yeah, so we're entering the second world age, and which day are we at this point?
The 6th day. We're at the 6th day. And at the 6th day, the Lord... This is right after the angel wars or during the angel wars, right? Right. Well, this is, it kind of... Because what we have in Genesis 1 is a recreation of the earth after the destruction of these angel wars. Then you have the Lord recreating the planet in a way that would be hospitable to the creature he's about to create on the 6th day. And so Genesis is about him unfolding the perfect paradise, hospitable place to put Adam and Eve, and it was a set-apart place, too.
Was not Adam created first just as Adam and then later the Adam and Eve?
Yes, he was. And it wasn't until Eve was split off from him, because Adam was a hermaphroditic being. And it wasn't until he named all the creatures and saw not one like himself that the Lord decided to split Eve off from him. And then that's when female and genders, actually male and female, came into being. But before then, Adam was much like the angels, a hermaphroditic being.
And let's talk about that just a second before you go into the details of the second age. One, I do think Dr. McQuaid might be onto something when it said, and he took a rib of Adam. It might be a ribosome. So we can talk about that later. I think he might be correct on that.
Definitely DNA, something connected to DNA. You know.
Yeah. So he's probably right on the ribosome being translated as rib, but when Adam was a hermaphroditic, angelic, spiritual being of the first prototype design, and he was not yet fallen. Here's where I'm going with this, Brother Zen, is the issue of being fallen. And so I want to have, when you go into the second age, I want you to emphasize any details that lead up to and encounter the fall and what that represented and the results were.
Yeah, I think I know where you're going with this. And I think, and I'm not sure if we talked about this or not, but from my understanding is that Adam, before, even before Eve, and even after Eve was split off from him, they were bright-natured beings, meaning that they were clothed in light, that they were some kind of etheric energy.
Light beings. Some kind of
light beings, exactly. Much like, even these angelic, that supposedly, can manifest or go through walls or whatever, that they weren't necessarily dense and in flesh form. They weren't, they were higher vibrating light, energy, sound, whatever you want to call that consciousness, that spirit. They were still that. And it wasn't until the corruption when, after Eve was split off from Adam and then they took on gendered form, that Satan or Samuel or Lucifer, whoever you want to call him, then wanted to take revenge against Yahushua on this, because on the second day, he wanted to have dominion over the entire, he wanted to put his throne above God. He wanted to have control and make the decisions. He wanted to be the head honcho.